The crowd gathered like vultures in the dusty town square of Redemption Creek, their faces twisted with a mixture of fear and righteous anger as Zephyra Anderson stood bound to the wooden post, her long auburn hair whipping in the autumn wind of 1878. The townsfolk whispered among themselves, eyes narrowed with suspicion as Sheriff Tom Halloway read the charges against her witchcraft, dark magic, and bringing misfortune upon the good people of this Arizona Territory settlement. "I've done nothing wrong." Zephyra shouted over the growing murmurs of the crowd. Her green eyes flashed with defiance despite the tears threatening to spill. "You blame me for your misfortunes because it's easier than facing the truth." The crowd grew louder, their calls for punishment becoming more insistent. The drought had lasted 3 seasons, cattle were dying mysteriously, and 2 children had fallen ill with fevers that wouldn't break. Someone had to be responsible, and the strange woman who'd arrived 6 months ago with her herbs and remedies seemed the obvious choice. "She healed my boy's leg when Doc Miller said it needed amputating," a lone voice called out, but it was quickly drowned by the louder accusations. "And the very next day Miller's prize horse died," someone countered. "Coincidence?" Sheriff Halloway raised his hands for quiet. "We'll hold her until the circuit judge arrives next week. The law will decide her fate." As the crowd began to disperse, a tall figure pushed through from the back. His worn leather boots kicked up dust with each deliberate step, spurs jingling softly as he approached. The sheriff's hand instinctively moved to his holster as he recognized the newcomer. Bryce Rawlins was not a man to be trifled with. His reputation as one of the fastest guns in the territory preceded him, though few knew much else about the man who kept mostly to himself on his modest ranch outside town. "Sheriff," Bryce nodded, his voice low but carrying weight that made others listen. The afternoon sun caught in his light brown hair, and his blue eyes were cool as they assessed the situation. "This woman has a right to proper defense. She'll get it when Judge Bennett arrives," Halloway replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "In a week's time." Bryce questioned, glancing at Zephyra, who stared back at him with a mixture of surprise and wariness. By then, half the town will have convinced themselves she's responsible for everything from the drought to their bad luck at cards. Zephyra's eyes widened slightly as she studied the cowboy defending her. She'd seen him occasionally in town but had never spoken to him. He was a loner, much like herself. "What do you propose, Rawlins?" the sheriff asked warily. "Release her into my custody. I'll ensure she appears for trial." Halloway scoffed. "And why would you do that for a stranger? A witch, at that?" Bryce's gaze never left Zephyra's as he answered, the ghost of a smile playing at his lips. "Because if she's bewitching anyone, it's me." "You bewitched me the moment I saw you," he said directly to her, then turned back to the sheriff. "And I don't believe in witches, just scared people looking for someone to blame." The sheriff studied him for a long moment before sighing. "On your head be it, Rawlins. But if she disappears before the judge arrives, it'll be you in that cell." "Fair enough," Bryce agreed. As the sheriff reluctantly untied Zephyra's bindings, whispers rippled through the remaining onlookers. Bryce offered her his hand, which she took hesitantly after rubbing her raw wrists. "Why?" she whispered as he led her toward his horse. "Let's get away from here first," he murmured, helping her onto his chestnut stallion before mounting behind her. "Then we'll talk." The ride to Bryce's ranch was silent, the rhythmic hoofbeats the only sound as they left Redemption Creek behind. Zephyra sat stiffly, aware of the stranger's solid presence at her back. She'd spent months keeping to herself, healing those who dared seek her help, only to be rewarded with accusations and bindings. The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise modest but well-maintained with a small main house, barn, and corral where several horses grazed. Bryce dismounted first, then offered his hand to help her down. "You're safe here," he said simply. "At least for now." Inside, the cabin was surprisingly comfortable, clean, and organized with sturdy furniture. A large bookshelf against one wall caught Zephyra's attention immediately. "You can read?" she asked without thinking, then blushed at her presumption. Bryce smiled, the expression softening his weathered features. "My mother was a schoolteacher before she married my father. She made sure her sons were educated, brothers, too, both back east now." He gestured toward a chair. "Sit, you must be exhausted." Zephyra sank into the offered seat, her body suddenly acknowledging the strain of the day. "Why did you help me, Mr. Rawlins? You don't know me." Bryce busied himself lighting the stove and setting a kettle to boil. "I know enough. I've seen you in town. You helped Martha Carson's boy when he had that fever last spring, and old Jim Peters says his arthritis hasn't bothered him since you gave him that salve. And you believed them over the others. I believe in judging folks by their actions, not rumors." He paused, looking at her directly. "And I wasn't entirely joking back there. You did catch my eye the first time I saw you at Miller's General Store. Not many women out here wear that look of independence you carry." Zephyra felt her cheeks warm despite herself. Independence wasn't exactly a choice. "Rarely is," he agreed, pouring hot water into 2 mugs. "Tea, it's nothing fancy." "Thank you." She accepted the mug gratefully, wrapping her cold fingers around its warmth. "What happens now you rest. Tomorrow we figure out how to prove to a town of frightened people that you're not responsible for their troubles." "That may be impossible," she said softly. "Perhaps, but I'm known for attempting the impossible now and then." His smile was reassuring. "The bedroom is yours, I'll take the chair." "I couldn't, you can and you will," he insisted gently. "No arguments, you've had enough trouble for one day." That night, lying in Bryce's bed surrounded by the unfamiliar scent of leather and pine, Zephyra stared at the ceiling beams, wondering at the strange turn her life had taken. 6 months ago, she'd arrived in Redemption Creek seeking anonymity after fleeing the scandal that had followed her from Boston accusations of impropriety, when she'd refused the advances of a prominent doctor she'd worked with. She'd thought the frontier would offer freedom. Instead, she'd found new suspicions. Morning came with the sound of movement in the main room. Zephyra dressed quickly in yesterday's clothes and emerged to find Bryce preparing a simple breakfast of bacon and biscuits. "You didn't have to cook," she said, embarrassed at being waited on. "I do it every morning," he replied matter-of-factly, "though usually with less skill. I'm afraid these biscuits might qualify as weapons." His self-deprecating humor surprised a laugh from her, the first genuine laugh in what felt like ages. "I could teach you. Cooking is just another kind of medicine, mixing the right ingredients in the right proportions." "Is that how you see it? Your healing, I mean," she nodded, accepting a plate from him. "My grandmother taught me." She knew which herbs eased pain, which brought down fevers, which helped wounds heal clean. "People called her a healer in our village. Here they call me a witch. Different words for the same thing depending on whether people are grateful or afraid," Bryce observed. "You seem to understand much for a rancher," she ventured. "I wasn't always a rancher." His eyes clouded briefly. "The war changed many of us, sent us searching for quieter lives. The Civil War had ended 13 years ago, but Zephyra knew its shadows lingered in many men's eyes." She didn't press further, sensing his reluctance to elaborate. "What did you mean yesterday, about proving I'm not responsible for the town's troubles?" Bryce sat across from her, his expression thoughtful. "Redemption Creek has always been prone to drought. And as for the sick children and dead livestock, I have a theory about that." "Which is?" "The new mining operation upstream. Caldwell's men have been digging for silver for months now. I've noticed the creek water running strange, some mornings cloudy with a metallic smell." Zephyra's eyes widened. "You think the water's been poisoned? From the mining?" It would explain a lot. Animals drinking directly from the creek getting sick first, then people using well water that's less affected but still contaminated. He studied her reaction. "You don't seem surprised." "I've suspected something similar," she admitted. "Several of the sick came to me with the same symptoms: stomach pains, weakness. I advised them to boil their water, but most dismissed it as more of my strange notions. Then we need evidence. Something clear enough that even the most superstitious can't deny it. We. Her voice caught on the word. Bryce's eyes met hers. Yes, we. Unless you'd rather face this alone, the offer of alliance of not being alone for the first time in months made her throat tighten unexpectedly. No, she said softly, I wouldn't. After breakfast, they rowed out together to examine the creek. Zephyra brought a small satchel of glass vials she used for her remedies. The creek water, when they collected it, had a faint bluish tinge and a distinct metallic odor. Mercury, Zephyra said grimly. They're using it to extract silver from the ore. And it's flowing straight into our water supply, Bryce finished. We need to take this to Sheriff Holloway. He won't believe me. He's already decided I'm guilty. Then we'll make him believe us. We'll bring him here, show him the source. Bryce's determination was palpable. And if necessary, we'll go over his head to the territorial governor. Caldwell's not above the law, wealthy as he is. The conviction in his voice gave Zephyra courage. As they rode back toward the ranch, she found herself studying his profile against the vast Arizona sky. There was a quiet strength to him that she hadn't encountered in the men she'd known before. You never did fully explain why you stepped in yesterday, she said. The real reason. Bryce was quiet for a long moment. I've seen what fear and ignorance can do to people. During the war, I watched men dehumanize each other to justify what they were doing. After, I saw towns turn on anyone different when times got hard. He glanced at her. And maybe I've been alone too long out here. When I saw you in that square, something just broke loose in me. I couldn't stand by. The simple honesty of his answer moved her. Thank you, she said softly. Whatever happens, thank you for that. Back at the ranch, they devised their plan. Bryce would approach Sheriff Holloway the next day, while Zephyra would prepare her evidence, not just the water samples, but a record of all the illnesses she'd treated and their similarities. Careful notes that no one could dismiss as witchcraft. That evening, as they sat by the fire after a simple dinner, Zephyra found herself telling Bryce about her life before Redemption Creek, her upbringing in a small Massachusetts town, her work as a nurse during the war, and later as an assistant to a Boston physician until his unwanted advances forced her to flee. I came west because I thought I could start fresh, she concluded. Be judged on my abilities, not on rumors or a woman's expected place. And instead, you found new prejudices, Bryce observed quietly. Different ones, perhaps, but yes, she hesitated. What about you? You mentioned brothers back east, James and Thomas. One's a lawyer in Philadelphia, the other teaches at a college in New York. A hint of pride colored his voice. I was the only one who couldn't settle back into civilization after the fighting stopped. You were an officer, he nodded. Captain by the end, Union Army, Massachusetts 54th, Zephyra's eyes widened. The colored regiment, but you're not. No, but I believed in what they were fighting for, still do. His expression grew distant. Lost a lot of good men at Fort Wagner after that. Well, cities felt too crowded. Too many ghosts, so you came as far west as you could. Something like that. His smile returned, softening the edges of old pain. Never expected to find myself harboring an alleged witch, though. Life takes unexpected turns, she agreed, finding herself smiling back. The comfortable silence that fell between them felt unusual to Zephyra, a connection she hadn't anticipated. When their eyes met across the firelight, something electric passed between them, startling in its intensity. Bryce cleared his throat first. We should rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges. Morning arrived with an unexpected complication. Riders approaching the ranch. Bryce, already up and dressed, spotted them through the window. Looks like the sheriff, he told Zephyra as she emerged from the bedroom, and he's not alone. She joined him at the window, her heart sinking as she recognized several of the town council members, including Edward Caldwell himself, a portly man whose wealth from the silver mine had bought him considerable influence. They're early, she murmured. We're not ready, we'll have to improvise. Bryce's hand briefly touched her shoulder. Stay calm. Remember, we have truth on our side. The confidence in his voice steadied her. As the riders dismounted outside, Zephyra quickly gathered the water samples and her notes while Bryce went to meet their visitors. "Sheriff," she heard him greet them as she joined him on the porch. "This is unexpected." "Not entirely, I think," Holloway replied grimly. "Mr. Caldwell here has raised some serious concerns about your guest." Caldwell stepped forward, his expensive suit out of place against the rugged landscape. "Miss Anderson has been spreading dangerous rumors about my mining operation, Rawlins, claiming we're poisoning the water. It's slander, pure and simple." Zephyra's surprise must have shown on her face as Caldwell continued, "Oh yes, word gets back to me. You've been telling folks to boil their water, suggesting my mine is making people sick. How convenient that you're now concerned about my alleged witchcraft when I question your business practices," Zephyra replied steadily. "Especially when we have evidence." She held up one of the glass vials containing the Cloudy Creek water. "What evidence?" Scoffed Councilman Parker, a thin man who owned the town's only hotel. "Some water in a bottle. For all we know, you mixed that yourself with your witch's potions." "Then come see for yourself," Bryce challenged. "The creek water upstream from Caldwell's operation is clear. Below it, it looks like this. Animals drinking from it are dying." Sheriff Holloway seemed hesitant, glancing between Caldwell and Bryce. "That's a serious accusation." "One easily disproved," Caldwell insisted. "What I'm more concerned with is this woman's influence over the town. First her herbs and potions, now turning folks against legitimate business. She needs to stand trial as planned." "And she will," Bryce assured them, his voice calm despite the tension evident in his stance. "But first, I'm asking you, Sheriff, as a lawman sworn to protect all citizens, to investigate our claims. If we're wrong, no harm done. If we're right." He left the implication hanging. Holloway shifted uncomfortably, aware that several pairs of eyes were fixed on him. "I suppose there's no harm in looking," he finally conceded. "This is absurd," Caldwell blustered. "I won't stand for it." "What are you afraid of, Edward?" asked Daniel Rogers, a weather-beaten rancher among the group who had so far remained silent. "If your operation is clean, as you say, then let's put these accusations to rest." Caldwell's face reddened, but he found himself outnumbered as the other councilmen nodded in agreement with Rogers' reasonable suggestion. "Fine," he snapped. "But when this witch's claims are proven false, I want her in custody immediately." "And if they're proven true?" Zephyra asked quietly. No one answered her question as the group prepared to ride out to the creek. Bryce insisted Zephyra accompany them, keeping her close by his side as they made the journey. She felt his protective presence like a shield against the suspicious glances of the others. The evidence, when presented, was undeniable. The contrast between the water upstream and downstream from Caldwell's operation was stark enough that even the most skeptical councilmen had to acknowledge it. When they investigated further, they discovered barrels of waste mercury being dumped directly into a small tributary feeding into the main creek. Caldwell's foreman, confronted with the evidence, admitted the practice had been ongoing for months, a cost-saving measure ordered by Caldwell himself to avoid the expense of proper waste disposal. "You're poisoning the entire valley," Sheriff Holloway said, his face pale with anger. "The livestock, the children." "It wasn't intentional," Caldwell protested weakly. "I didn't know it would cause such problems." "Didn't know or didn't care to know," Bryce challenged. The sheriff turned to Zephyra, genuine regret in his expression. "It appears we owe you an apology, Miss Anderson. Your warnings were well-founded." "The apology should come from all of us," Daniel Rogers added. "We were too quick to blame instead of looking for real answers." Caldwell, seeing the tide turning against him, attempted to shift blame. "She's still practicing medicine without credentials. That's illegal regardless of her other actions." "My grandmother taught me healing," Zephyra replied steadily. "I've never claimed to be a doctor. I offer herbs and remedies to those who ask, and I've never charged more than the cost of the materials. She saved my grandson when your contaminated water nearly killed him, Rogers countered, glaring at Caldwell. As far as I'm concerned, she's done this town nothing but service. The confrontation ended with Sheriff Holloway placing Caldwell under arrest for criminal negligence and ordering an immediate halt to all operations at the mine until proper safety measures could be implemented. As the group rode back toward town, the mood was subdued, the implications of what they'd discovered weighing heavily on everyone's minds. Bryce and Zephyra returned to the ranch in silence, both processing the dramatic shift in circumstances. It wasn't until they were inside that Zephyra finally gave voice to the emotion overwhelming her. "It's over," she whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "They know the truth." Bryce stepped closer, gently wiping a tear from her face with his thumb. "They do. And they'll have to face their own guilt for how they treated you." "What happens now?" she asked, echoing her question from 2 nights ago. "That depends," he replied softly, his blue eyes searching hers. "Do you still want to leave Redemption Creek, start fresh somewhere else?" The question caught her off guard. She had been so focused on surviving, on clearing her name, that she hadn't considered what would come after. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to stay to prove I can't be driven away by fear and ignorance, but another part is tired of fighting," he finished for her. "Yes," she met his gaze directly. "What would you advise?" "I can't tell you what's right for you," Bryce said, "but I can tell you what I hope." "And what's that?" His hand found hers, fingers intertwining with surprising gentleness for a man who had known so much hardship. "I hope you'll consider staying, not just in Redemption Creek, but—" He hesitated. "Here, with me." Zephyra's heart skipped. "Bryce." "I meant what I said that first day, though the timing was poor," he continued, a hint of vulnerability in his voice that she hadn't heard before. "You did bewitch me from the first moment I saw you in town. Your strength, your independence, I admired you from afar long before yesterday." "You never spoke to me before," she pointed out, though her fingers tightened around his. "I'm not good with words, better with actions." His smile was self-deprecating, and approaching the beautiful healer woman seemed presumptuous, but facing down an angry mob for her didn't. She teased gently. That was different, that was right and necessary. His expression grew serious again. Asking you to stay, this is selfish. I know you've had your fill of men making unwanted advances." The reference to her past made Zephyra realize how carefully he'd listened to her story, how much he'd understood about her need for autonomy. It moved her deeply. "There's nothing selfish about honesty," she said softly, "or about offering connection rather than demanding it." Their eyes held for a long moment, unspoken understanding passing between them. "I can't promise you an easy life," Bryce warned. "Ranching is hard work and people's memories are long. Some will still whisper about the witch and the reclusive cowboy." "I've never wanted easy," Zephyra replied. "Just true." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been before, both familiar and thrillingly new. His lips were gentle against hers, asking rather than taking, and she responded with a certainty that surprised her. The days that followed brought rapid changes to Redemption Creek. Caldwell was sent to the territorial capital to stand trial, the mine operations were halted pending new safety regulations, and the town council issued a formal apology to Zephyra, lifting all accusations against her. More significantly, townsfolk began openly seeking her healing skills again, this time with gratitude rather than furtive secrecy. Sheriff Holloway himself brought his wife to consult Zephyra about a persistent cough that had troubled her for months. Through it all, Bryce remained steadfastly by her side, neither possessive nor presumptuous, but present in a way that made clear to everyone that they were building something together. They moved cautiously, learning each other's rhythms and histories, finding unexpected commonalities in their shared values of justice and autonomy. By the time winter settled over the territory, Zephyra had fully moved to the ranch, bringing her herbs and healing practice with her. She converted a small outbuilding into a workroom where she prepared remedies and occasionally saw patients from town too ill to travel easily. On a crisp December evening with snow threatening in the heavy gray clouds, Bryce found Zephyra in her workroom, carefully labeling jars of dried herbs by lamplight. He watched her for a moment, struck anew by the concentration in her expression, the delicate precision of her movements. "You look happy," he observed, leaning against the doorframe. She glanced up, her smile immediate. "I am, for the first time in years, I feel, settled, purposeful." "Good," he said simply, crossing to her and placing a small wooden box on her work table. "I have something for you." Zephyra looked at the box curiously. "What's this? Open it and see." Inside, nestled on a bed of soft cloth, was a silver ring set with a small green stone that caught the lamplight. "It was my mother's," Bryce explained, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "My father gave it to her when they decided to build their life together." Zephyra's breath caught as she understood his meaning. "Bryce, I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give," he assured her quickly. "There's no rush, no pressure. But I wanted you to know that whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'm here. I want to build something lasting with you." She touched the ring gently, emotion welling in her throat. "People will talk, the witch and the cowboy. Let them," he said simply. "We know the truth of who we are." Zephyra stood, taking his face between her hands. "And who are we, Bryce Rawlins?" His smile was tender as he answered. "Two people who found each other when they weren't looking, two people who chose to stand together against fear and ignorance. Two people building something true in a world that often settles for less." "Yes," she whispered, tears shimmering in her eyes. "That's exactly who we are." She slipped the ring onto her finger where it fit as if it had been made for her. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white, a clean slate, a fresh beginning. 6 months later, in the spring of 1879, they were married under the ancient cottonwood tree by the creek, now running clear and clean again. The entire town turned out for the celebration, their former suspicions transformed into genuine respect for the healer who had exposed the truth and the cowboy who had stood by her when no one else would. As years passed, their ranch prospered and expanded. Zephyra's reputation as a healer grew throughout the territory, bringing people from miles around seeking her remedies and wisdom. Bryce's steady management and fair dealings made their ranch one of the most respected in the region. Together, they built a life defined not by the whispers that had once threatened to destroy them, but by the courage that had brought them together. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when they sat together on their porch watching the sunset paint the Arizona sky in impossible colors, Bryce would take Zephyra's hand and smile that private smile meant only for her. "Still bewitched," he would murmur, bringing her fingers to his lips. And Zephyra, who had once been so alone, would lean against the shoulder of the man who had seen her truth when others saw only their fears, and whisper back, "Still enchanted." In a land where survival often depended on hard choices and harder hearts, they had found something rare and precious, a love born of respect, forged in adversity, and sustained by the simple, everyday magic of two people who chose each other, day after day, without reservation or regret.